Hi everyone, welcome back to Ask an Autism Mom Live with Jenn of LakiKid.com. You can join her every Monday live on Facebook to learn tips, meet other parents, and share your insights. She will tackle any topic from the dreaded meltdown to the basics of how autism can affect a family.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Ask an Autism Mom Live. I'm Jenn of LakiKid.com, and today I'm sitting down with Laurie, who is a mom and a blogger. I'll get more into that in a minute. And we are actually discussing something that I feel is extremely important and not even noticed or spoken about. The most taboo subject in autism parents: isolation, parental isolation, family isolation. We don't talk about it, but so many of you have admitted to me that you can't go anywhere because your child, it's so hard on your child. So today we're going to sit down and talk about isolation. So remember, you can join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Facebook to watch my tips and tricks, meet other parents, and share your insights. Now, to subscribe to that, you can press the number 5 in the comment section now, or go to LakiKid.com/live. So again, like I said, I want to welcome all of you listening, and let's see who's watching today. Shannon, Alicia, Melinda, good morning, folks. So of course, we all know we have a major sponsor for our show, LakiKid. And one of our most popular items right now is our ball chair. This ball chair simply sits on the floor and allows your child to bounce and move. If you are looking for a way to get them focused and involved in homework this summer, I suggest the ball chair because it gives them the freedom of movement, but it also lets them focus and work on anything you're working on. Do I make my child do summer school homework? You bet I do, because I do not want to go through the 2-3 months of her having to relearn these skills in September. Hi, Jason. Welcome back. Like every week, you're right. Jason, I don't know if you just saw, but we're talking about parental isolation. And I know you and I have kind of briefly talked about how you're a stay-at-home dad and you wouldn't change it, but it gets hard being a stay-at-home parent. So for today's show, we have Laurie McLean, sorry folks, who is a special needs mom and also a blogger at lifewithasideoftheunexpected.com, where her mission is to support special needs parents so that they can find balance in the chaos, experience joy in the messy moments, and make the most of their unique parenthood journeys. She's also a board-certified reading specialist and school administrator and special education advocate who shares her experience navigating the school system from both sides of the story. So, Laurie, thank you for coming. I'm so excited to talk about something that you and I, folks, let me be honest here. Friday, Laurie and I sat down to talk about today's show, and it was on a different topic. And Laurie and I discussed and realized isolation is real. If I'm feeling it, and I'm 7 years in the journey, Laurie's feeling it, and she's in her kids are in their teenage years, and she's still going through it. It happens, folks. Parental isolation, familial isolation is real, and we are going to tackle it today. Now, Laurie, how would you describe isolation in reference to the common feeling amongst parents of special needs children?
I think isolation creeps up on us. I think in the beginning, when our kids are first diagnosed, we're sort of in that shock, perhaps grieving, and we go to battle. You know, we have those feelings of, this isn't what we expected, and we have to go through that process, but we really sort of just go to bat for our kids. And what happens is somewhat slowly, but when it does creep up, we realize that we've lost a sense of our old life. We've lost a lot of our old relationships. Our peer groups change. And like you mentioned earlier on, sometimes the behavior of our children or even their schedules don't permit us to have the connections that we used to have. So I think the isolation that accompanies being a parent is because our whole life and perspective and the focus becomes caretaker, and we play so many roles, and our sort of connections with other people are sort of last on the list. So we become, nurses, doctors, educators, caretakers. We do all of those things, and we lose a sense of our sort of self as a connected adult outside of that role.
Exactly. And not only that, I found for me the isolation came in the beginning. I was so slammed with so many therapists, doctor's appointments, specialists, that Riley couldn't handle it and would scream constantly. And so what did I do? Unless it was a therapist or a doctor, I didn't leave my house. All my therapists came in. So I was very stuck in my own home. But if I left the house, Riley would scream and scream and scream until we returned home. Finally, eventually, she was able to go to a couple of people's houses, mainly her aunts, who accepted her for who she was, and we kept a weighted blanket and would run in the room and wrap her up. But isolation is extremely, extremely common, parents. So if you are feeling this feeling, I just want to give a disclaimer. You are not wrong. You are not failing. You are doing your best job, mom and dad. If you feel that the isolation, and I'm going to be honest with you, and I know Laurie will agree with me, there's a certain point when isolation turns from just being isolation into something more harmful. If you are isolating, I please beg you to contact your doctor, get some therapy if needed. I went to therapy and I don't regret it. A lot of work, a lot of jobs now have as part of their health insurance. I don't know if you know about this. I believe it's called an EAP, but it's counseling. Through your insurance, you get 5 or 6 sessions of free counseling. Call your insurance company. Ask what they have. Guess what? I found out my insurance covered in-home therapy where the therapist would call and we would do over the phone. That way I didn't ruin Riley's routine, but I was still getting the support I need. Now, Laurie, why do parents of autistic kids often feel the isolation?
I think as parents of children with autism, there are many different reasons, because some of us feel like we're teetering on that fence of being a parent of a kid with an invisible disability. So sometimes we don't have a place where we fit in quite well. Sometimes the behavior, like you said, it's just easier to stay home. It's just easier. And I call it, and what I experienced, like you mentioned, my son's 14 now, but I'd say for a good decade, I was in what I call a defense mode and a survival mode. And it was just easier to stay home, to not put myself out there, to constantly have to explain behavior or deal with looks or hope, that he'll be accepted and not rejected. So it's part of like a self-preservation almost to sort of like go into that defense mode, where it's just you want to see that you're helping your child make progress, but you also want to make sure that it's exhausting to constantly feel like it's just easier to stay home than to go out and have meltdowns or have looks or all those types of things. So I think specifically being a mom of a kid with autism, a lot of the behavioral stuff is very people have an opinion. People see bad behavior. They sometimes they're not very helpful. Sometimes they're downright rude and judgmental. So again, it's like that defensive, just easier to sort of not even venture out. That leads, I think, to a sort of isolation. And you had mentioned, I just want to also make mention of this because for me, it also did turn into more than just isolation. I did experience depression as well. And it was something that I needed to reach out for help. You had mentioned that I'm a blogger, and two of my biggest posts that have reached thousands of people are on special needs parent isolation and special needs parent depression. So this is a very, very real topic, and you feel very alone, but you're not alone, parents. So just want to get that out there. I'm glad we're talking about this because it is something that we tend to keep inside.
And like she said, and when I said go to the doctor if it seems more, it's so easy for isolation to turn to depression. I too went through it. It is not something to be ashamed of. You come out a stronger person when you face these trials. Now, when do feelings of isolation happen? I asked someone, didn't I?
Yeah, I think we touched on that. I think the feelings of isolation happen, like you had mentioned in the very beginning. It's almost like we do get slammed, but also, the fact that it does creep up after perhaps some unsuccessful outings or just that feeling of panic that you're afraid something will happen. So, it can kind of happen quickly and then also creep up.
And I think sometimes if you look at certain children, mine is now verbal. At the time, she was not verbal. She'll say, I don't want to go out because it's too many people. It's too loud. So she's putting herself now through this isolation, and I'm having to, as much as it hurts, pull her a little bit outside of her comfort levels, because if I don't, then she will sit in my room all day and watch TV, and that's all she'll do, which is what she's doing right now.
Very true.
So don't give up on your children if they want to isolate themselves. Find something that they can't say no to. Worst case scenario. For us, it's simple and affordable. My friend has puppies. My daughter likes puppies. When we're having a bad day, we see puppies.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, animals are great for that. For the kids who feel isolation, and even us adults, a pet is a great helper to keep us calm and give us a little bit more. So, what are some of the realities about being a parent to an autistic child that may cause isolation?
I think one of the biggest one is that our social circles change. We aren't able to sort of sit on the sidelines and interact with parents as the kids are off playing as easily. We don't tend to go to classroom functions and do that, networking with the parents. When I would go into the class, I was literally acting almost as like a TSS or an aide because I wanted my child to be able to participate. So I think that was a big one. You don't have as many chances as for the informal, socializing with other parents. You're a little more
gymnastics, dance. They're out for a lot of our kids.
Absolutely. And I think about even my parents who are in their 70s, and some of their best friends are friends that they met when my brother played baseball. And that's still who they're best friends with. And we don't necessarily have those connections happen as naturally as if, they're in the recreation league for your town. I think also our energy levels change. Like I mentioned in the beginning, everything seems like a battle. We battle for services, we battle for support, we battle for acceptance. And a lot of times it just, our energy levels are not where we can put a lot into making new social connections or even figuring out ones that will work for our family. And I think also the offers to help kind of dwindle a little bit because other people start to realize that your child might be a little more difficult to handle, or they don't know what to say. They don't want to offend you. And I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, people weren't rude about it, but they just sort of dwindled the offers to help, or even carpools or things like that. People didn't know how to I guess, approach or manage. So I think the realities of having a child with autism are that we are their main everything. So being able to get help, being able to connect with others, being able to have the energy to do much of anything else, a lot of times just isn't happening. And I think that's, at least in my experience, what happened, especially in those early years.
And I just got to say, I was really thrown off a couple of years ago. We were at a good place. She was not isolating. She was in a special needs preschool classroom. And all moms got the invitation for Mother's Day tea. And we were told that the gym would be set up with little little tea areas and activities. And we would go with our child and join them and do all this wonderful things. Well, I get there and I walk in the gym, and the secretary grabs my arm and says, "Oh, no, you're not in here. The special needs kids get their own classroom. They don't participate in regular activities." And it kind of shocked me. Why would you send home a note promising all of this? And they promised my daughter all of that.
Oh, wow.
And all we did was we sat in her classroom and ate strawberry shortcake and had juice.
Wow. That's a case of the school isolating, so that's like almost indicative of like the larger picture that happens just so often that people don't even realize that it just sort of happens that way.
I think that really, I walked out of there, and I'm going to admit, I walked out of 20, 30 minutes later in tears. I fought so hard to come back from this isolation and this depression, only for a school to push me back into it.
Right.
Because my daughter can't handle it. I'm like, really? There are children I heard children in that gym that were neurotypical that were acting up more than the children in my daughter's class.
Right.
So I just, that was something that's stuck with me forever. It's been 3 years and I can't get over it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's a giant assumption I think that a lot of people make, that it's just going to be harder, and they don't know how to deal with it. I know in the beginning, and I'll be quite honest, my parents didn't know how to act because this was not something that their generation really had to deal with. So in the early years, there wasn't, a whole lot of offers, whereas I saw my brother's kids with my parents all the time, and they would go down to the beach with my parents, and I thought, why isn't that happening? And then I realized it's because they just didn't know how to handle him, and that's my own parents. So that in a way makes you feel even like, okay, these are the people you're supposed to be able to count on, your own family. And even then, like I remember New Year's Eve parties and holidays, all I wanted to do was get out of there. And that became my way of acting, is I would just, okay, do the least amount possible, go say hello and leave. And that was what we did a lot. So that was very isolating.
It is. And I think making it harder is the older generation. A lot of them said, "Oh, you can spank it out of her."
Right.
And that made me protect her, because I didn't want people saying, "Oh, it was a disciplinary action," when it was not. Autism is not a bad behavior. It is not something that needs to be disciplined. It is something that needs to be understood and accepted. So, what are the effects of isolation on parents? I mean, you and I have discussed our own personal effects. We both hit depression. We both hit, and probably you've hit anxiety.
I think there are both mental and physical, and sometimes even spiritual effects of the isolation that parents feel. Because I think, like we mentioned, that defense mode and that really turning inward and feeling like you have no one really gives you a sense of hopelessness almost. And I think, a lot of people who, were religious question, why would a God allow this to happen? A lot of people experience physical burnout because they're constantly on the go. They're running from appointment to appointment. And this happened to me. I think in the first 5 years of running around, I think I gained 25 pounds because I was constantly grabbing food on the go, or, he would only eat 5 things. Those were the 5 things that I ate, was like pizza, chicken nuggets. So there are a lot of things that happen when you go into this mode of, your child's services and support become the center of your life. But I think, in terms of what we talked about specifically with depression, that's like a buildup of that feeling hopelessness and feeling like things aren't going to change. So you mentioned that it is sort of our job to almost educate people about autism so that they understand that this isn't just bad behavior. So sometimes finding a purpose in that sort of helped me get out of things. It's just like, you know what, like I need to stop being so stuck and defenseless and educate people. So I used my educational background, but I also think that one of the things that I know is talked about a lot is self-care. But I think that that's very important, that you don't forget to take care of your own needs as you parent your children. And it doesn't have to be glamorous. It doesn't have to be joining a gym and being on the best diet, but it could be moments of deep breathing or journaling, just to sort of make sure that you're taking care of your own inner self.
Like I read or shower after my kids go to bed.
Yeah.
It's my quiet time. Now I am going to jump over to the question section right now, folks. Good morning from everyone. Alicia, I do have to agree. With age, your daughter is better. She sims a lot in stressful situations, but it does come with age. It's like anything. It's like maturity. They have to grow into it. And by constantly stretching them just a little bit outside of their comfort zone, we're getting them to be able to come out in public. Like I saw, not in our group, but posted the other day, someone I know personally had said that they can't leave their house this summer, and then it's going to take them 4 months to transition their son back into school. And I'm thinking, that's silly. So, she found some ways around it. Her school has a feeding program, so she's actually bringing him for school for lunch, even though she doesn't have to, but just so that the transitions and the isolation is not as bad on both of them. Now we have, everyone understands. You guys, like I said, this is such a taboo subject that it is hard. Now, Angela King says, before my son was diagnosed, we had to stop going to parties and change churches because no one wanted my boy around. I've done it. I've changed churches to a church where the pastor is blind and they have 2 grandsons on the spectrum. I've changed where we shop because they understand better. Changing things is not uncommon, and often it actually does help.
I had the same experience with church. We sort of were getting feedback each week when we picked him up that his behaviors were affecting all of the other children. That's how we were being approached. So we actually did find a different church, because that's not a place that you want to go and sit and stress out the whole time.
Exactly. And I like our church now because there's actually a classroom of a couple of children in their special needs.
Right.
And they're being taught by a former special needs teacher. So she's really getting to them now. So don't be afraid to make changes, because you never know if it's going to be the perfect change your family needs. Now, Shannon says, I'm actually able to take my son out, but I understand that autism children are different. There have been times I've had to take him out of a restaurant to de-escalate, but he's almost 7 now and does great, but he's high functioning. And that's how Riley is, folks, and I'm not going to lie, she is high functioning. For those of you that watched last week, she did 2 live videos for us. And she had a couple concerns, but she was able to get through it. So yes, every child is different. And I don't want parents to forget that autism is a rainbow. It's a spectrum. It's greater than we can imagine. Like I once said, it's like the stars in the sky. Not one star is the same as another, but they're all out there. So accept your child for where they are at and work from there. Angela again says, my parents are upset because they think I isolate my kids when we ask to have holidays at our house or take part of the kids to the babysitters for doctor's appointment. Now, Angela, I understand your concerns. Not many people are like Angela. She has 8 children, ranging from brand new newborn and up to teenagers. So for her, and most of them are special needs, for her, she has to divide them into groups and isolate. Half goes to grandma's, while half goes to the doctors, or whatever it is. And I think in Angela's case, and Laurie, I think you'll agree, the more children you have with special needs, the more it compounds that isolation.
Absolutely.
Because especially with the newborn, you don't want a newborn out in germs. So you're trying to think, oh, let's keep her home to keep her safe. And then you're like, oh, my 3-year-old won't put on clothes this week. We can't go anywhere.
And there's nothing wrong with changing and making your own traditions as well, because we did that a little bit in the beginning when the kids were younger, and it was just too much to, come down, open presents, and then expect, a transition out to go here and a transition back and then a transition to dinner. So, we made it so that it was what worked for us and our family. And, we invited people here, and some family members didn't want to change and some did. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with making your own traditions that work for you.
We actually meet a day or two before Christmas with my husband's family. My family's too far away. But we meet a couple days before Christmas. That way on Christmas morning, it's just Mom, Dad, Jack, and Riley. And yes, it takes her hours to get through everything because it's, oh, look, this does this. And she has to figure everything out. And every Barbie that she gets, which is her obsession, has to be discussed. Which Barbie it was, where it came from, what it does, why it was made. I mean, I know some of you hear that about different things, trains, Legos, whatever your child's obsession at the moment is. So, Chris, that is a great idea. And I was doing that for a while. Watching services on the television. It's not the same as fellowshipping with others in church, but at least you're not missing the church if that is important to you. Now, that is all for questions today. I really am happy that we were able to sit down and talk about this. I know that tonight, tomorrow, and the next few days, this video will be watched more and more, and hopefully more and more parents understand that it is okay. So please, if you know a parent who is struggling, send them the link to this video, tag them in everything, and do what it takes. Be there for them. If they're isolating in their house, go and sit in their house with them. I had a friend who did that. Came and plopped in my house and said, you're going to stay here, so I'm going to stay here. Now, I have one more question for Laurie that I totally forgot about. Laurie, do you want to talk about the ebook you have?
Sure. Like I mentioned before, I wrote these blog posts basically to sort of share my own experience with isolation and depression. And I had such amazing feedback from people that were just like, thank you for talking about this issue, and people that could relate. So I put together sort of an e-guide about isolation and some simple tips that might be able to help you cope with it as a special needs parent. So I think we can share the link with you, and you can sort of grab this ebook and walk through some tips that will help you feel a little less isolated. It is important to find others who can relate, and I know that when you do talk to other people who get it, when you watch this video, you might even just feel relieved knowing like, yes, it's not just me. So that's sort of the number one, but please grab a copy of this free e-guide. read about it. You can take a look at different posts I have on my blog, Life with a Side of the Unexpected, about depression, some talk about anxiety, and talk, you know what, I even have a post that I have shared with other people about how to support special needs parents. So sometimes when people ask, how can I help, and you don't know how to answer, you can send them this post that will tell them. And like Jen mentioned, sometimes it's just a matter of being there. But please know you're not alone. Grab the e-guide and reach out and do what's best for your family to sort of make some connections.
If you're looking for the ebook, Miguel has posted the link to the ebook in the comments section now. It is there and it will remain there if you are looking for it. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm Jenn Eggert, of course, from LakiKid.com. You can join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern for more parenting tips. Again, I want to thank Laurie for joining us on a very taboo subject that I hope we prove and show that it is not as scary, it is not as taboo, and it happens to all of us. I'm going to tell you, it even happens to a lot of neurotypical parents. They get stuck in a rut, and this rut becomes this isolating force that holds us back. So check out her ebook. We will be talking about this in group. Everyone remember LakiKid.com/groups to join our Facebook group. You can join at any time. I want to thank all of you for watching. Let me see, what else am I forgetting? Oh, I wanted to say that I am coming out with a blog this week, of course, on isolation. I will let you all know when that comes out. But that is my story of how isolation kind of ruled my life and I came back. So I want to thank you all. And remember, until next time, every child brings good luck.